Hello, my name is Nas Andronikou. This is a Capstone project for the Google Data Analytics Certificate on AHK for the period 2005 to 2024. AHK, or the Archi Elektrismu Kipru, shortened to the acronym Alpha Eta Kappa, is the Electricity Authority of Cyprus. AHK is the sole supplier and main generator of electricity in Cyprus.
In 2005, AHK stated as its mission the supply of safe and reliable electrical energy at competitive prices, the undertaking of relevant public service obligations against due compensation, the supply of other services of the highest quality for the more efficient exploitation of its capital resources and its expertise. The operations are to be performed with due respect to the environment, the health and safety of its employees, and the public in general, to respond to its customers' needs and expectations, and to safeguard satisfactory financial return. From 2006, that part about to safeguard satisfactory financial returns has since been dropped and not reintroduced. From 2006 to 2017, the mission changed to provide our customers with the highest quality of safe and reliable services in the energy sector and in other activities at competitive prices, respecting society, the environment, and our people, and contributing to the development of our country. From 2018 until 2024, consumers and network users were added with customers, along with utilizing new technologies. In 2018, a key point in the development of AHK, it added its vision to be the leading player in the energy sector, services, and other activities, and its values: integrity, respect to our clients, quality, human capital, society, and environment.
Firstly, a note on currency and exchange. The euro was introduced in around 2001. Cyprus joined the EU in 2004 and adopted the euro as its official currency in 2008. Annual reports and data until 2007 is in Cyprus pounds. For the period 1996 to 2001, I have used the fixed conversion of 1 Cyprus pound to €1.70. From 2002 to 2006, the average exchange rate for each year was used, and in 2007, the final fixed exchange rate was set. The currency data is standardized to euros throughout the presentation. In all annual reports, the first table is the year in brief. We will begin with 3 financial data points, the first 2 used to calculate the third. Total income in blue minus operating costs in yellow equals operating profit or loss sometimes. Some additions and subtractions are made to operating profit to arrive at net profit, the red line. In 2020, operating costs exceeded total income for over a year. When the yellow line crossed the blue and went above it, there was a net loss. This is presumably the result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Notice how closely income and costs mirror one another. In a standard corporate model, scaling infrastructure typically yields cost optimization and widening profit margins. Here, however, the lines remain tightly bound, so the financial growth path is visually stagnant. My first question to AHK is, why is that? Could it be a deliberate stagnation to cap profits for tax optimization? Could it be exceptional cost control and risk management? Could it be a constant reinvestment in AHK research and development and infrastructure? Could it be that AHK is heavily optimized for cash extraction rather than equity growth? Or could it be pass-through fuel costs? Is the cost of fuel the main force on total income? Let's pick things apart, starting with income, which is largely AHK customers paying their electricity bills, but it also receives income from other sources.
We'll remove net profit from the chart and add in some other year-in-brief data. The revenue from sale of electricity in red, the cost of fuel each year in green, and in dark blue all other costs to AHK other than fuel costs. If we add the green and dark blue lines together, we get the total costs in yellow. The red line of income from the sale of electricity almost matches the total costs. Why is this the case? There is a direct correlation between the cost of fuel and the total sales of electricity. The green and red lines follow the same path. In fact, you could probably make an accurate estimate of AHK's income from electricity sales for 2025 and 2026 based on the cost of fuel for those years. Double the fuel cost and you'll get the income from electricity sales. We will see a little later another close correlation between fuel cost and the cost of domestic use electricity. What forces are at play here? Is the cost of fuel oil setting the income from electricity sales? Are the total costs what set electricity prices? The dark blue line of costs other than fuel oil is interesting as those costs were generally substantially lower than the costs of fuel until 2019. From mid-2019, those other costs increased and exceeded the cost of fuel until 2024, when both are around 550 million euros. Why this increase in other costs not related to fuel oil? Now we'll take a closer look at income, then move on to costs. Around 92% of the total income of AHK comes from the sale of electricity, the blue line. In 2005 at 436.1 million euros, a peak in 2011 at 966.6 million euros, another in 2022 at 1.3 billion euros, then down to 1.1 billion euros in 2024. AHK receives income from other sources, increasing the total income to the yellow line. In 2024, electricity sales were 1.1 billion, but the total income was 1.2 billion. So what other income fills that average of 90 million euro gap between these lines? For the lowest income at under €500,000, both of which end in 2013, why could that be? In blue, income from damages to property of the authority. Was this insurance compensation? In the case of net income from maintenance of public lighting and sale of materials, in yellow, it stops being an income and then becomes a liability cost of AHK. Why? The smallest income is the profit from the sale of investments in a subsidiary. Profit was €6,000. The reports don't state the source, but they do report the interest of AHK in the joint venture AHK, IAC, AHERA and Aneosimes. Next, with income at under 8 million euros per year. At the bottom in red, interest income other at 1.3 million euros in 2024. This is not interest from money in a bank but elsewhere, but it's not defined in the AHK report. AHK receives finance income in light blue. This is also not defined in the annual reports. Finance leases are mentioned where AHK leases property and receives an income. In 2013, there was a drop. Could that be the result of the bail-in, also known as the haircut, by the Eurogroup, ECB and IMF? It could be income from financial investments. Another question for AHK. What exactly is finance income? In yellow is interest income from bank balances. This follows almost exactly the finance income. Could it be this is the interest on the finance income? Another question for AHK. There is a dramatic drop in both finance income and bank interest income from 2018 to 2022, then nothing, no more financial income, or just no longer reported. In dark blue, income from TSOC starting in 2014 at 2.6 million euros and rising to 4.4 million euros in 2024. The Cyprus Transmission System Operator, TSOC, monitors Cyprus's electric power transmission system and the energy market. You can visit the site at tsoc.org.cy to see the live data on electricity production split by source, oil, solar, wind, etc. We will look at TSOC in more detail as it appears again as a cost. Now for income up to 15 million euros per year. There is no definition that I can find in the annual accounts for sundry income, here in light blue. The steady 4 million euros per year income, a spike in 2013 at 9.4 million euros, a drop then from 2021, an increase to 2024 at 12.6 million euros. What is included in sundry income? In dark blue is income from fees from telecommunication usage of optical fibres. AHK has had a steady income of between 1 and 1.3 million euros per year since 2006. What is AHK's interest in optical fibres? How does it form part of an electricity generating authority? Why does income remain at that level and not increase? A little science on optical cables and electrical cables. Electromagnetic interference, EMI, the disruption of electronic device operation caused by unwanted electromagnetic energy from external sources. This can result in data loss, decreased signal quality, malfunctioning equipment, and unexpected system resets. Electrical cables emit EMI despite being shielded with a plastic coat. Any copper communication placed near electrical cables risks EMI. The higher the cable kilovoltage capacity, like those connecting electricity pylons, results in higher EMI. It's not possible to string up copper communications cables alongside electrical cables on pylons and in underground tunnels. Optical fibers using light to transmit data are not affected by EMI. This point is important to note when we talk about unbundling later. Suffice to say for now that an electricity authority and optical fiber network is a good match. In red, storage and other fees relating to the Cyprus Organisation for Storage and Management of Oil Stocks, COSMOS. This is also referred to as CODAP. What begins as an income from 2005 until 2009 later becomes a cost, which we will look at when we get to costs. Between 2010 and 2017, €57.4 million was income from greenhouse gas emission allowances costs recovered. Between 2008 and 2010, AHK paid €24 million in greenhouse gas emissions allowances. We'll see this later when we look at costs. There were no reported emissions payments before 2008, so I don't know how this refund was calculated. In any event, in 2018, AHK paid a cost of €38.5 million, rising to €211.2 million in 2024. When we look over the 20-year period, this is a cost and not an income. In 2021, a new income source was added and continued increasing until 2024 to €12.9 million, electricity market income. Another question for AHK. What is this income? Where does it come from? The annual reports show a total for the 4 years to be €26.7 million, but with no notes. On income up to €30 million per year. First, consumers' capital contributions, the upfront fees paid by citizens to expand or upgrade AHK's local grid infrastructure, have more than doubled, climbing from €12.2 million in 2005 to €27.1 million in 2024. Second, desalination income spiked dramatically. It averaged around €10 million annually until 2021 before surging to over €25 million by 2024. This raises a critical question. Why is desalination power accounted for separately from standard commercial electricity sales? And what are the pricing details of AHK's stake in the Vegelia plant? Finally, in red, other operating income is undefined in the annual reports. It inexplicably doubled to nearly €13 million in 2024. On the 11th of July 2011, at the naval base Evangelos Floragis at Mari, a large amount of ammunition and military explosive self-detonated, killing 13 people and injuring 62. The close-by Vasilikos power station sustained extensive damage to property, plant and equipment and was taken out of commission. The station covered 60% of AHK's generation. €392 million income between 2011 and 2019 is not shown on this chart, relates to the explosion. There was a temporary surcharge on customers, compensation from insurance, and a temporary generator cost and surcharge recovered by the Republic of Cyprus. That's all on income. We'll move on to costs now. How much does it cost to run AHK? Let's start with the highest cost per year, fuel oil. Oil is burned in power stations to generate electricity. Over 90% of Cyprus's electricity is generated from burning oil, a fossil fuel. We will look at energy production in more detail later. Suffice to say for now that in 2024, €579.2 million was spent on fuel oil. For the 20-year analysis period, it is €8.4 billion. I have added here the cost of purchasing electricity from renewable energy sources to illustrate how little is spent compared with fuel oil. We can see a rise and fall in the amount spent on fuel oil by AHK over the 20-year period. Is this because there was a varying volume of oil required? Possibly, but it looks more related to the rise and fall of global oil prices, as there is a close correlation. I have plotted oil prices in yellow on the right axis in US dollars per barrel, and in 2024 it was 75 US dollars per barrel. The oil price data is not from AHK but from Kaggle, a reputable source of open data. Was it an increase in the amount of oil purchased that caused a spike, or was it the usual volume of oil at a higher price? The annual reports from AHK do not state the volume of oil, only the purchase cost. The data shows the fuel cost fluctuates in the same pattern as oil prices. By removing the overwhelming cost of fuel oil, we can isolate AHK's secondary expenditures. Staff costs, light blue, remain steady at around €100 million annually for roughly 2,000 employees. However, in dark green, between 2005 and 2011, AHK had to inject a massive €95.5 million in deficiency contributions just to top up an underfunded employee pension scheme. Meanwhile, routine operations are climbing across the board. Yearly depreciation on infrastructure has doubled, rising from €54 million in 2005 to €106 million in 2024, totaling €1.7 billion over 2 decades. Similarly, annual repairs and maintenance costs more than tripled over the same period, peaking at nearly €40 million. Finally, materials, services and other expenditure, in red, consistently averaged €41 million per year. Other costs of around €226.4 million from 2011 to 2014, not shown on this chart, relate to the explosion and damage to the Vasilikos power station. This was temporary generators cost, provision for the non-recoverability of temporary generators costs and repair costs of the Vasilikos power station itself.
Some extra data on employees. On the left axis in red, the staff costs as we saw on the previous slide, and on the right axis, the number of employees as at the 31st of December of each year. An average of 2,200 employees in service each year. I was expecting to see a steady rise in the number of employees, but the yellow trend line shows a steady decline in numbers. There was a peak in 2009 and 2010 with 2,466 and a low of 2023 in 2017, a difference of over 400 employees.
The greenhouse gas emission allowance cost of €38.5 million in 2018 ballooned to a peak of €256 million in 2023. There is a drop of €45 million to €211.1 million in 2024. What is this cost? The polluter pays principle. The EU imposes a mandatory penalty of €100 per tonne of CO2 equivalent for excess greenhouse gas emissions under the EU Emissions Trading System, ETS. Energy companies can pay a greenhouse gas emissions allowance as a sort of license to pollute instead of paying a penalty. The idea is to help energy companies transition over time to more green energy sources. We saw earlier that between 2010 and 2017, €57.4 million was income from greenhouse gas emissions allowances costs recovered, accounting for the gap here. When we total the costs, we get €1.1 billion minus the cost recovered of €57.4 million is €1 billion over the 17-year period. The total costs of AHK for the 20-year period are €15.3 billion. So that one single item of €1 billion makes up a substantial amount of cost. Questions for AHK are, is this cost included in the calculation of electricity tariffs for customers? Why is AHK reluctant to purchase more electricity from third-party suppliers? Why in the last 5 years at least has AHK not done more to reduce this cost by reducing oil consumption and investing in more renewable energy? We will look at this cost again when we come to generation. Other fees paid by AHK are the CODAP fee. The EU imposes an obligation on member states to maintain minimum stocks of crude oil and/or petroleum products. This is to ensure security of supply and to mitigate risks of supply disruptions. CODAP is the organisation that stores the oil at a cost of just under €6 million per year. The Cyprus Transmission System Operator, the TSOC, we saw earlier as an income, here as a cost. A €3.4 million payment in 2006, then nothing reported until 2013 at €3.1 million, a peak in 2019 of 7.1 million, dropping to 5.9 million in 2024. The Cyprus Energy Regulatory Authority fees, CERA, the CERA, is the National Independent Energy Regulatory Authority of the Republic of Cyprus, which is entrusted with the regulatory control of the proper functioning of the internal electricity and gas market. CERA received from AHK an average of 1.8 million euros per year since 2014. Before we move on from income and liabilities, I wanted to draw attention to two items that appear to be both income and cost to AHK over the years. Firstly, Cosmos. In Cyprus, ο Κυπριακός Οργανισμός Διαχείρισης Αποθεμάτων Πετρελαιοειδών, CODAP, Cyprus Organization for Storage and Management of Oil Stocks, is a non-profit, semi-governmental organization operating under the supervision of the Minister of Energy, Commerce, Industry and Tourism of Cyprus, which maintains the minimum stocks of crude oil. According to their website, they hold 536,000 metric tons of oil products as at 7 May 2026. In total, 64.1 million euros has been paid to CODAP between 2005 and 2024. From 2011 to 2017, the annual report showed no CODAP fee paid. Why is that? So, income or cost? The annual reports don't have much information. The 2009 annual report states, the income is recognized within other operating income. The same amount is included in the operating expenses of generation, which represents the authority's subscription to Cosmos. The 2017 annual report states under Range of Services, management of the rental contracts for the fuel tanks at Vasilikos Power Station to Cyprus Organization for Storage and Management of Oil Stocks. Some more questions. If more green energy was produced in Cyprus, would this CODAP fee be reduced? What happens to CODAP if no oil is used in electricity production? On that matter, what happens to the power stations? I was using Google Earth to find the Vasilikos power station and found the CODAP warehouse right next door. There is a pin in an empty field labelled Future Energy Centre, which is possibly this area which looks to have solar panels installed. You can also see the crater left by the explosion of the ammunition right next to the power station. A memorial monument to the 13 killed has been placed nearby. Secondly, on both income and cost is the TSOC. AHK receives some income from TSOC starting around 3 million euros in 2014, rising to 4.4 million euros in 2024. AHK then paid TSOC a fluctuating amount, 3.4 million in 2006, then nothing reported until 2013, a high of 7.1 million in 2019. Over the period, costs are 61.7 million in total, minus the 38.9 million in income is a 22.9 million cost to AHK. What is the arrangement here? When we take a look at the 20-year totals, there's a 16.9 billion euro income and a 15.3 billion euro cost. Almost 90% of income came from the sale of electricity, with just over 10% on other income sources amounting to 1.7 billion euros. On costs, 69% or 8.4 billion euro was spent on fuel oil, with the remaining 31% or 6.9 billion euro on other costs. The difference between the totals here of 1.6 billion in operating profits reduces to 743 million after all the accounting adjustments. Having looked at the year in brief data for the 20-year period, my question to AHK would be, are high electricity prices necessary in order to cover the costs of running AHK? Not just the high cost of fuel oil, but the other 31% of costs. Are some of those other costs directly related to fuel oil price? As less fuel oil is purchased, do some of those other costs reduce? Let's move on from the financial side of AHK to the power production side. When you look through 20 years of AHK annual financial reports, you might believe that they mostly deal in green energy, especially in 2009 where many of these images are from. What would that mossy light bulb do when you plug it in? There may be some greenwashing when we see the amount of renewable energy sources like solar and wind, In the reports, the term generation means fuel oil power plant electricity and production means RES, but the terms are used interchangeably. How much energy is generated by AHK? This chart is in terawatt hours, that is 1 trillion watt hours. The blue line shows us what AHK reported for the period 1996 to 2018. Fortunately, data.gov.cy provides data as far back as 1960, shown here in yellow for generation and in red for consumption. The AHK line follows the equivalent of generation sometimes, and other times consumption, but remains between the lines, so we can assume the data is more or less accurate. From 0.2 terawatts or 213 gigawatt hours in 1960, a steady increase. A slight decrease in 1974 to 1975, presumably owing to the invasion and occupation of Cyprus by Turkey. Another decrease in 1994 to 1995. Was such a large difference between generation and consumption at that time indicating wasted energy? There was a significant decrease when the Vasilikos power station was damaged by the explosion at the Mari naval base. A small extra note on efficiency. In the annual reports where AHK electricity generated was shown, there was also a thermal efficiency of generation percentage. This had an average range of 33 to 39%. Power stations are limited by the thermodynamic Carnot cycle. A massive amount of energy is wasted as heat, even in the most efficient combined cycle plants, which use exhaust heat to turn a second steam turbine. About 40 to 50% of the energy and the cost of the fuel is lost to the atmosphere or cooling water. If the thermal efficiency of generation is 38%, this means that only 38% of the fuel is turned into useful electricity. The other 62% is wasted. There was an increase in 2018 with 5.06 terawatt hours generated, then a staggered decline. This decline is significant. There is the increased use of green energy produced, but as we've seen from the purchase costs of third-party electricity, it's not a massive amount, so why? The data cuts off in 2018 for consumption. There seems to have been major changes which were reflected in the annual reports. From then, there is barely any reference to energy generated and consumed, or even the terms kilowatt, megawatt, or gigawatt. I believe this was the start of unbundling when other organisations took over the reporting of such data. Cyprus is not connected by any undersea electrical cables. All the oil power produced by AHK comes from the three power stations. Vegelia in 1953, the first government-funded power station with main transmission lines linking Nicosia, Larnaca and Limassol. In 2009 and 2010, internal combustion engines were installed and brought into operation. AHK constructed a second power station at Moni, the first phase of which was completed in 1966 and the third and last phase in 1976. At the same time, the transmission and distribution network was upgraded in the town centres and significantly expanded. In 1997, work began on the construction of the third power station in the Vasilikos area, the first phase of the Vasilikos power station consisting of two steam generation units and an open-cycle gas turbine unit, which came into operation in 2000. A third steam unit was installed in 2004, followed by two combined cycle gas turbine units in 2010 and 2011. This map shows the three power stations on the south coast. The other squares and circles show the locations of around 67 substations and their capacities. The map also shows how the power stations are connected to the substations, either with overhead or underground cables. The light blue, yellow and purple colours indicate the lower capacity kilovolt cables, and the dark blue, red and black being the higher capacity. The capacity of the cables is important when we explore unbundling later in this presentation. Keep in mind that AHK customers also form part of this network, with solar-powered buildings contributing to energy production on a small scale. Making sense of the arcane world of calculating the cost of electricity has been the most difficult part of this analysis and results in a long slide, but please bear with me. To simplify, let's look strictly at residential bills. The table shows a snapshot of the billing period January to March 2024. These are the costs used to calculate the subtotal based on kilowatt usage. The green line tracks the cost for using the network, which has remained at around 3 cents since early 2021. Tiny fractional costs in the table don't appear on the chart as they don't appear clearly. Auxiliary services at 0.65 of a cent. What are these auxiliary services? Bear and excès at exactly half a cent per kilowatt hour. This is the fund used to promote and subsidize renewable energy sources. It's the source of the funding for Solar for All. The fund pays 3,000 and then the customer pays 5,000 for a solar power system. The yellow line tracks AHK's basic production tariff, which stabilised following a 2017 structural reform by the CERA. In 2024, it was 10.35 cents per kilowatt hour. The baseline remains stable because fuel costs are entirely excluded from it. Instead, the volatile global price of oil is passed directly to the consumer via the fuel adjustment cost in red. When Russia's invasion of Ukraine sent crude oil soaring past €793 per metric ton in 2022, this adjustment added a massive 18.5 cents per kilowatt hour, instantly doubling household electricity bills. For solar homeowners, Res LV, residential low voltage in blue, AHK historically bought back surplus energy using an avoided cost model tied directly to the price of oil, peaking at 25.8 cents in 2022. However, under the CERA Decision 112, that link was severed. AHK now permanently caps its solar buyback rate at just 11 cents. On the right axis, and acting as a background, is the cost of crude oil in euros per metric ton. This shows just how close oil prices and Res LV buyback costs were until 2023. When you add up the basic tariff, the volatile fuel adjustment, network usage fees, and VAT, consumers aren't paying 10.35 cents, they are paying 32 cents per kilowatt hour. Multiply these fractional cents across Cyprus's annual 4.3 terawatt hour consumption, and tiny line items like half a cent green subsidy generate 21.5 million euros, driving AHK's total annual electricity sales to a staggering 1.2 billion euros. There is sporadic help of 20 or 30 euros from the Ministry of Finance, applying the lower 5 or 9% VAT rates instead of the standard 19%, and currently in 2026, money off vouchers for LED light bulbs, but bills keep increasing. Let's take a little pause from the AHK data. I would like to introduce a fictitious new currency just for this data analysis. It will help make sense of some large numbers. This currency is called an ohm and is valued at around 8,000 euros, which is linked to the current average cost of installing a residential 4 kilowatt solar power system. Personally, in the 5 years I've been living in Lefkosia, I've paid 4,000 in electricity bills, so it would be around 10 years to reach that 8,000 euro. Despite it being a cost-saving investment for the future, right now 8,000 is not reasonable. Even with the government subsidy of 3,000 leaving the 5,000 to the customer, it's too much. My idea is to have 1 ohm invested in each house, covering the entire cost of a solar power system. A repayment model would need to be created to include variables such as the surplus electricity entering the network, depreciation of the solar system hardware, amortize the cost of the intangible kilowatt maybe, property liens and electricity purchased by the customer. In the annual report, AHK refers to innovative solutions for land acquisition. I think an innovative solution for use of space, that is residential rooftops, should be implemented. The ohm should be set off against space. In a few slides we will see that space is a key factor in solar power efficiency. Space is the leverage and asset in maintaining low energy prices now and in the future. Remember the ohm at around 8,000 euros per house investment compared with AHK's other investment we will see in a bit. We saw in the previous slide the staggered decline of AHK's fuel oil energy generation. Some can be accounted for by buying third-party electricity. I believe the decline is for buildings with solar power systems. They cover their electricity needs during the day, plus create a surplus, so overall AHK needs to produce less energy. In the daytime, the consumption needs are covered by solar power, so there's no requirement to purchase electricity from AHK for that period of the day. This period of self-sufficiency from self-production could account for some of the decline. I very much like this idea of self-generated democratic electricity. I also believe that if you have the space, you should be permitted over the current 4 kilowatt limit for residential and 6 megawatt limit for commercial. Additionally, I would bring the net metering system back, or a version of it, for the purposes of this ohm investment scheme. Now to a non-AHK dataset. This is 2024 data from Eurostat showing the mix of different fuels that went into each European country's electricity generation. Sorted by the highest percentage of fossil fuels used, Cyprus is second after Malta. Cyprus generated less than 10% of electricity from wind, solar and other biofuels. Interesting that both are islands and that an island is also in the top 5. Iceland leads the way with their use of hydro and natural thermal energy with 0% carbon emissions from electricity production. When looking at the European partners, fossil fuels in light blue and nuclear in pink are a big part of the mix, especially for the bigger countries. Hydrofuel is also a large percentage for those with water. What surprised me was the small part that solar is across the EU. Even countries like Spain, Italy and Greece, which share a similar light level, have low percentages of solar. Why is that? Biofuels and wind seem to be a bigger part of the mix. From near the top of the list in percentage of fossil fuels used to produce electricity to fifth from the bottom of the list in the amount of electricity generated at 5.76 terawatts per year. These are figures for all electricity generated, fossil fuels and the other production methods. Compared with the rest of Europe, the amount of electricity generation or production from Cyprus is tiny. France and Germany produce half a petawatt hour per year. A petawatt is the next unit after a terawatt and is 1 quadrillion watt hours. The final bit of data from Eurostat is that Cyprus has the highest greenhouse gas emissions footprint in Europe, over 14 tons of CO2 equivalent per capita. Luxembourg's energy mix is around 88% non-fossil fuel, yet it is third highest here. Why? In AHK's annual reports for 2022, 2023 and 2024, in the management report of the group section, the group being AHK, under the title Climate Change, it states, the group's management has taken note of global awareness and concerns about the potential impact of climate change. Currently, this matter does not have a significant impact on the consolidated financial statements, and the future effects on the group's activities and business plans are difficult to predict. Management continues to monitor developments in this area and will respond as necessary. According to the Cyprus Ministry of Energy, Cyprus is setting ambitious targets, aiming for 33.17% renewable energy by 2030, significant energy savings, and the transition to zero-emission buildings. At the same time, the green transition of the industrial sector is being promoted through new policies focused on competitiveness, innovation, and the use of green hydrogen, while enterprises are supported through targeted initiatives. Let's have a look at where AHK is investing in green energy and otherwise. In 2013, AHK began investing in equity securities, here in blue. I quote from the annual reports. These instruments comprise primarily equity investments listed on the Cyprus Stock Exchange, classified as trading securities. Why is AHK investing at all? Is this an AHK employee pensions related investment? In 2021, AHK decided to invest 42.2 million in mutual funds. This is in red and plotted on the right axis, being a much larger sum than the equity securities. What has AHK to do with financial investments? Why is this being invested in the financial market and not investment in green energy or making electricity cheaper? That investment grew to 196 million in 2023 and 225.4 million in 2024. AHK has locked up 226 million euros in financial investments, the equivalent of over 28,000 ohms. What about other AHK investments? Maybe there will be some green energy projects. The AHK Group includes subsidiaries and joint ventures. First, AHK maintains 100% ownership of 3 subsidiaries, Electricity Ananiosimes, EAC LNG Investments, and ESCO AHK. Despite being incorporated between 2000 and 2016 for green energy and efficiency projects, all 3 remain entirely dormant with zero financial activity and are staffed by the exact same 9 directors who sit on the main AHK board. Second is AHK Ahera Ananiosimes, a subsidiary created for large-scale solar park development. In 2019, AHK transferred 50.1% of its ownership to the Holy Archbishopric of Cyprus, handing control to the church. Since this asset transfer, AHK's annual reports have completely omitted this company, providing zero public transparency regarding profits, losses, or returns on investment. Finally, we have the natural gas infrastructure company DEFA, a joint venture where AHK holds a 30% stake. In 2020, AHK injected €43 million into this special purpose vehicle, alongside a €101 million EU subsidy. What is the return on this massive €43 million investment? By 2024, DEFA reported a single-year operational loss of over €10.2 million. External consultants explicitly warned of asset impairment, indicating the investment's value has already plunged to €38 million. We must ask, why are customers funding shell companies and toxic gas infrastructure instead of investing in our renewable energy sources? €43 million is over 5,000 ohms. On the DEFA board of directors, there are 3 who in 2019 and 2020 served on the AHK board. One member is the ex-Human Resources Manager and then Deputy General Manager at AHK from 2006 until 2016. One member of DEFA's board also sits on the board of the parent company, Natural Gas Public Company, DEFA, DEFA. I have attempted to organise the organisations that make up the energy sector in Cyprus. In the centre, AHK with its 3 wholly owned subsidiaries. Then there are the joint ventures, one with the HAC in AHK Ahera Ananiosimas Limited, the other in DEFA with Cygas. Cygas, the natural gas public company, uses the Latinized characters of its Greek acronym from Δημόσια Επιχείρηση Φυσικού Αερίου, DEFA. When you look at the DEFA and DEFA websites, they are almost identical. The DEFA site does not have an SSL certificate, so your browser may warn you not to proceed. DEFA operates under the Public Natural Gas Enterprise Law of 2022. The Council of Ministers appoints the board of 9 directors of DEFA. One of those members must be the Director General of the Ministry of Energy, Commerce and Industry or his authorised representative. AHK operates under the law Cap 171 of 1952, under the authority of the Ministry of Energy, Commerce and Industry. The Minister of Energy, Commerce and Industry has certain powers under the law. The Minister may, after consulting AHK, issue to it instructions of a general nature as to the exercise of its powers necessary for the general interest of the Republic, and AHK must implement any such instruction. On the European side, certain organisations have been created as a response to EU law. For the purposes of harmonisation with Article 57 of the European Union Act on Common Rules for the Internal Market in Electricity, and Article 39 of the European Union Act on Common Rules for the Internal Market in Natural Gas, CERA, CERA, was established. CERA, the Cyprus Energy Regulatory Authority, is managed by 3 members, who are appointed by decision of the Council of Ministers after consultation with the Parliamentary Committee on Energy, Commerce, Industry and Tourism. That same law on common rules for the internal market in electricity requires that a transmission service operator be established, directly responsible for the operation and development of the transmission system. The Transmission System Operator of Cyprus, using the acronym TSOC, monitors Cyprus's electric power transmission system and the energy market. For the Cyprus energy market, CERA regulates it and TSOC monitors it. The Cyprus Organisation for Storage and Management of Oil Stocks, COSMOS or CODAP, is the organisation that manages this. AHK, as we saw earlier, is the fund used to promote and subsidise renewable energy sources. The grant schemes operated by the fund are issued by the Council of Ministers upon the proposal of the Minister of Energy, Commerce and Industry. Let's take a closer look at DEFA as an investment. Why is AHK investing in a company that is suffering a loss from continuing operations over 5 years? What is the status of DEFA? Information from news channels provides this. A floating storage and regasification unit, FSRU, named Prometheus, is an asset of the joint venture of AHK and DEFA. The vessel remains idle in Malaysia whilst delayed necessary equipment is installed and FSRU certification is provided. This is also dependent on the upgrade of Vasilikos Power Station. The upgrade includes a jetty to which the floating unit will be permanently attached, as well as the mooring facilities, a pipeline on the jetty and unloading arms, overland pipes up to the border of the Vasilikos Power Station. In February 2026, Yorgos Pedrou, chairman of the AHK Board of Directors and the authority's representative on the Natural Gas Infrastructure Company, stated the Republic is charged roughly 400,000 to 450,000 euros for every month the vessel stays anchored. The website vesseltracker.com allows you to find where the ATIFA Prometheus is currently located. You can then make an estimate of the cost of it sitting idle based on the number of months since at least February 2026 at 400,000 euros per month. It has been 5 years for this project to start at a cost of 43 million euros with a loss of 4.5 million. 43 million euros is the equivalent of 562 ohms. This also seems to be the wrong direction given liquid natural gas is a fossil fuel that produces CO2 upon combustion and has potential methane leakage. It is subjected to carbon pricing mechanisms aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The ATIFA website has had no announcements since 2020. One name frequently appeared in this data analysis. Bolivios Lemonares, who served on the AHK Board of Directors from 2019 to January 2024, sits on the ATIFA Board of Directors and is chairman of the three-member board for CERA, the Cyprus Energy Regulatory Authority. We will look at AHK's owned and leased assets, both land and other assets. These are AHK leases and land assets which appear in the annual reports from 2018 onwards. In red, the freehold land owned by AHK at a value of 49.2 million euros in 2024. In blue, leases that AHK pays. The definition of leases in the 2024 annual report is, I quote, "The group leases offices, warehouses, stores, land for renewable energy sources projects, and land for substations. Rental contracts of land for substations are typically made for fixed periods of 25 to 33 years, with some contracts valid for periods up to 99 years. Most of them have extension options. Any other contracts are made for fixed periods of 6 months to 30 years. Lease terms are negotiated on an individual basis and contain a wide range of different terms and conditions." The report goes on to state, AHK continues to expand its portfolio of RES projects while exploring innovative solutions for land acquisition through long-term partnerships and private land leases, further boosting clean energy production. What does innovative solutions for land acquisition mean? From 2018 to 2024, AHK leases rose from 8.2 million to 17.1 million euros. There is a sharp rise in 2022 from 10.5 million to 15.4 million. Caused that 4.9 million increase. In 2024, around 1.4 million euros per month was paid in leases. It would be an interesting side data analytics project to look at all the lease contracts. These are the values of assets owned by AHK. Freehold land is much lower asset value than the others shown. Steady investment in lines, cables and meters, with smart meters being rolled out in 2026. A staggered sharp rise for plant and machinery from 2005 to 2013, and then a decline until 2024. What caused this? Is this depreciation of plant and machinery over time? AHK owns buildings at an average value of 178 million per year. From the 2022 annual report, AHK operates the PV park in CERA and at the same time, using its know-how and experience, and in cooperation with the Ministry of Education, has installed photovoltaic systems in 405 schools in Cyprus, a project that represents an important step for the energy sustainable future of our country, a necessity that is highlighted and transmitted to our young people in the most effective way through the specific action of AHK and the Ministry of Education. In addition, AHK, in collaboration with SHSO, the State Health Services Organisation, will install a PV system in the car park of the Nicosia General Hospital. The report goes on to state the photovoltaic park is located at CERA and is built in the area of the existing high voltage substation. Its nominal capacity is 3 megawatt peak and currently is the largest PV park in Cyprus. The park is another EAC activity in the area of renewable energy sources. The park is comprised of 12,000 solar panels and covers approximately 4.6 acres of land, around 18,500 square meters. It is expected to generate 5,000 megawatt hours per year. 5,000 megawatts is 5 gigawatts, just over 0.1% of the total electricity produced by AHK. That 4.6 acres of land is a massive amount of space. It is enough to accommodate 25 standard suburban subdivision houses. The cost of that amount of land in that area is around 1.5 to 2 million euros if you look at property listing websites for the cost of land in that area. Did AHK buy this land? Is it part of the innovative solutions for land acquisition, leases and partnerships? Will the cost of that huge space have an ongoing and rising effect on the cost of electricity? When looking at solar power efficiency, space is a key factor. Space can be expensive, but with a public partnership, it can be free. This radar chart shows a year like a clock from January to December. If we use what CERA Solar Park is estimated to generate, we can see what happens as the year progresses from the winter solstice, shortest day on December 21st, at under 10 hours of daylight, to the longest day of the summer solstice on the 21st of June with 14.5 hours of daylight, a difference of 4 hours and 44 minutes. Generation is around 10 megawatt hours per day in the winter and increases up to 15 megawatt hours per day in the summer. That instability occurs daily if you change the timescale from a year to a day. Instead of beginning in January, the clock starts at sunrise, and instead of ending in December, it ends at sunset. Solar panels only capture certain wavelengths of light. The rest passes through the panel or is reflected as heat. Weather conditions like cloud cover, dust storms, mist and fog can affect solar energy production. Dust and pollen sticking to the panels can reduce productivity. Solar power efficiency is difficult to compare with the thermal efficiency of generation from burning oil. One important difference between the two is energy density. Oil is a concentrated form of energy, solar is diffuse. An oil power station can produce 5,000 megawatts on a small plot of land. CERA Solar Park needs almost 19,000 square meters to produce 5,000 megawatts. Another difference is the input value. If an oil plant is 35% efficient, you are losing 65% of something you paid for. If a solar panel is 20% efficient, you are losing 80% of something that is free. When comparing, thermal efficiency is a measure of how little of a paid resource is wasted. Solar efficiency is a measure of how much power you can squeeze out of a specific area, that is land density, or space. Space is crucial here. Most residential buildings will have around 25 to 30 square meters of space on the roof to accommodate a 4 to 6 kilowatt solar power system of around 8 to 10 panels. That space is redundant or free space, free in the available and the monetary sense. We'll come back to space when we cover unbundling. Other factors when considering efficiency, aside from solar not working at night, is solar power output. You will get what you get when you get it. It's a fluctuating, unpredictable live system. Economically, it's a system that crashes itself every day. Imagine overnight all 457,000 buildings in Cyprus had solar panel systems. That figures from the 2021 census. At around 10:30 in the morning, you will have a surplus of 2 kilowatt hours. You message your neighbour asking if they want to buy that electricity, but that neighbour and everyone on the island is in the same position. They have consumed what they need and also have a surplus. At that point in the day, there is a supply flood with zero demand. The price of selling 1 kilowatt hour of electricity is not zero value, it's in the minus value figures. That happens daily. By 3 in the afternoon, that surplus is now 4 kilowatt hours. Still a supply flood, but demand starts to increase. People start to come home from work and school, and electricity demand goes up. Computers, games consoles, ovens, microwaves, mixers, hoovers, leaf blowers, drills, washing machines, dishwashers, irons, and a million devices plugged in to charge their battery. This all coincides when solar starts to go offline and produces not only no surplus energy, but no energy at all. At that point, supply is zero, but demand is 100%. How do you price a unit of energy like 1 kilowatt hour when it crashes at midday and skyrockets at sunset? By midday on the summer solstice of the 21st of June, there is the biggest crash of the year. What's needed primarily is a way to store the surplus solar electricity. The second thing required to work alongside storage is a method for calculating the price of 1 kilowatt hour of solar electricity. A formula that stabilizes the crashes that happen daily. A formula when multiplied by 1 kilowatt hour would be a fair price. A formula that incorporates daylight hours and maybe geographic location. This map from the World Bank Group shows global photovoltaic power potential. Due to the Earth's tilt, two distinct bands of peak potential emerge at 22 degrees north and south, increasing in the Andes and the Himalayas. Conversely, notice a sudden drop in the eastern half of China. On the same latitude as the Himalayas sits Cyprus, located at 35 degrees north but at 33 degrees east. Zooming in on Cyprus, we can see how potential varies across the island. The south coast and the Morphy Bay area are particularly high, with a distinct dividing line along the Troodos Mountains. Generally, Cyprus holds the highest solar potential in Europe. However, this abundance creates a major challenge. At peak production times, the energy market becomes entirely saturated. When demand and supply needs balancing, TSOC orders curtailment. This stops the flow of renewable energy to protect the electricity network, first from large-scale renewable facilities, then from residential systems. For entrepreneurs who invested in solar energy farms, this is a massive problem. Huge amounts of electricity is wasted because the system can't handle the surplus. As an isolated electricity network, Cyprus can't export its excess energy to neighbouring countries. It must generate exactly what it consumes in real time. We are rapidly approaching a tipping point where demand is fully met at peak hours, meaning further investments in solar farms will no longer be financially viable. This is accelerated by the rapid rise of residential solar. The scale of this shift is staggering. According to the Institute of Energy for Southeast Europe, Cyprus set a record for wasted solar energy in 2025. By that time, installed renewable capacity reached over 1,000 megawatts, nearly matching the island's traditional fuel-based plants. A May 2026 report from Philonews highlighted that residential solar has officially become the largest renewable source on the island, with nearly 100,000 homes exporting over 22 million kilowatt hours to the grid every single month. Not every building in Cyprus needs solar panels to meet our total energy needs. Under the current framework, adding more installations will only trigger more curtailments and more wasted energy. Ending net billing and capping residential systems at 4 kilowatts are direct attempts to mitigate this saturation. Before Cyprus gets to 100% solar, massive infrastructure changes are required to prevent financial waste. A financial model is required to deal with the midday extreme oversupply and the evening shock when the sun goes down. Power supply drops to zero while household demand peaks, leaving a massive energy void. In order to deal with saturation, there will need to be a shift in society and employment, a structural reallocation of labour from roles in fossil fuel power plant operations, fuel logistics, and heavy marine transport to high-tech grid management, electrical engineering, battery maintenance, and localised smart grid installations. This would mean vocational training in colleges and universities. If Cyprus and/or AHK solve this, the payoff is historic. An island society with abundant, cheap, and stable electricity. Businesses could operate with predictable overhead, households could freely cool their homes in intense summer heat, and entrepreneurs could launch entirely new industries built on cheap energy. So how does Cyprus get to 100% renewable energy at cheap prices? Storage of electricity on a national scale. Back in 2012, an MIT TED Talk by Professor Donald Sadoway introduced a brilliant concept: liquid metal batteries made from abundant, cheap materials. This technology has since been commercialized by a company called Ambri into shipping container-sized grid batteries. They use layers of liquid calcium and antimony separated by molten salt heated to 400 degrees. What makes this fascinating for us is that abandoned mine waste in Cypriot villages like Mathiadis and Shah contain high concentrations of antimony. If we can ecologically process this toxic waste to recover materials for local grid storage, we solve two massive problems at once: cleaning up environmental hazards while building advanced batteries. In 2010, AIC was involved in a research project named GRODERS. GRODERS is Grid Reliability and Operability with Distributed Generation Using Transportable Storage. The main objective of this project is to use transportable and flexible electrical power storage systems on an experimental basis and assess their operation. The results of this innovative project will demonstrate the effectiveness of the feasibility of using such storage systems in the European electricity distribution grids of the future. I can't find any current information about this 16-year-old electricity storage project. Beyond chemical batteries, we must look to mechanical solutions that use surplus solar energy. Supercapacitor electrostatic charge batteries, compressed air storage, green hydrogen, and redox flow batteries are all options. However, the most elegant and practical solution for Cyprus is pumped hydro storage. Pumped hydro storage uses two water reservoirs at different elevations. Surplus daytime solar pumps water uphill. When the sun sets, gravity drops the water back down through turbines to generate power. The image shows a proposed project in Greece using two upper reservoirs. Cyprus consumes up to 13 gigawatt hours per day, meaning we need roughly that capacity in storage. This would require about 13 gigalitres of water. For context, our Kouris and Asprogremos dams hold 25 and 15 gigalitres respectively. The key is to finding a location 300 metres higher than an existing reservoir to get the water pressure needed for massive turbines. Fortunately, the Troodos Mountains rise to nearly 2,000 meters. Several of our existing reservoirs are built into natural rocky hill faces, making them perfect candidates to be retrofitted with an upper battery reservoir 300 meters above. Countries like China are scaling this massively with over 58 gigawatts of installed pumped hydro. For Cyprus, a modular mix of these localized solutions is the key. The question we have to ask is, why isn't AHK already doing this? AHK analysts surely predicted this green energy transition driven by residential solar. The threat of grid saturation is obvious, yet they continue to invest heavily in massive, unbuffered projects like the CERA solar park. Why lock up €226 million in mutual funds and security equities when that exact capital could be invested directly into national energy storage? If Cyprus had adequate storage, our fossil fuel power stations could finally power down. That means eliminating €500 million per year in fuel costs. That means saving another €200 million per year on greenhouse gas emissions allowances. AHK operational costs directly related to fuel price or volume of fuel also decrease. When you look at the prospect of saving well over €700 million annually in operational costs while delivering cheap, stable electricity to customers, a €226 million investment in storage is a good financial, data-driven decision. So why the hesitation? The reason, and perhaps a highly convenient one for AHK, comes down to unbundling. Since 2019, huge portions of AHK's annual reports have been dedicated to a single, legally mandated concept: unbundling. This directive from the European Union is designed to split up energy monopolies to create open, competitive markets. EU Directive 2019 number 944 dictates that any distribution system operator, like AHK, must be completely independent in its legal form, organization, and decision-making from other commercial activities like generation and supply. Under Article 15A of this same directive, citizens are granted the explicit right to energy sharing as active customers in a non-discriminatory manner. This means regular households and small businesses have the right to generate, use, and trade their own solar energy. More importantly, they have the space to do so. The law restricts production to 6 megawatts for small and medium-sized businesses, which is telling. Saturation must also be an issue in Europe. This model works beautifully across continental Europe, where land borders allow national grids to connect, pool resources, and share excess capacity smoothly. But Cyprus is an isolated island network, and here lies the catch. We saw earlier the kilovoltage capacity of cables is important for transmission and distribution. Look at how the EU defines the unbundling energy sectors. Transmission means the transport of electricity on the extra high voltage and high voltage interconnected system, with a view to its delivery to final customers or to distributors, but does not include supply. Distribution means the transport of electricity on high or medium voltage and low voltage distribution systems with a view to delivery to customers, but does not include supply. Supply means the sale, including the resale, of electricity to customers. The directive treats these as separate corporate entities, but in Cyprus, distribution and transmission are effectively a single, unified network. Trying to artificially liberalize a market that operates on a single, isolated infrastructure is highly problematic. Most critically, the unbundling law blocks AHK in storage. Article 35 states, distribution system operators shall not own, develop, manage, or operate energy storage facilities. This means EU law legally prohibits AIC from investing its massive capital into building the large-scale grid storage solution Cyprus needs to stop solar curtailment. The wider plan is Cyprus stops being an isolated system and can share its electricity production via the Great Sea Interconnector. The European Energy Commission has awarded the status of Project of Common Interest and a €657 million grant with a 10-year development plan for linking the energy grids of Cyprus, Greece, and Israel. €657 million is 82,000 ohms. That grant money would be far better spent on local storage. EU law does allow for certain derogations for unbundling. Derogations are exemptions from certain articles in the EU directives. I would not stop at requesting from the European Council derogations for unbundling. I would request EU investment in electricity storage and use Cyprus as a sample study for a true, self-contained, democratic green energy system. But to make that happen, we have to look closely at who is steering the ship. Who are the people behind these massive investment decisions? Since 2005, 65 people have been the decision makers on the AIC board of directors. When you take a bird's eye view of their tenure, patterns emerge. In 2014, the entire board resigned and 10 new members were appointed. A near identical mass exit occurred in 2024. Incidentally, the law which established AIC, Cap 171 of 1952, states the authority shall consist of not more than 7 members appointed by the Council of Ministers, of whom one shall be chairperson and the other as vice chair, to serve for a period of at least 5 years, subject to conditions, and need not be full time. 9 members of the board seem to be the norm, not 7. What interested me when looking at this list is who were the decision makers behind the AHK and Nelsimes joint venture with the HAC from 2019, the €43 million investment in DEFA in 2020, and the €42.2 million investment in mutual funds in 2021, which rose to €225.4 million in 2024. The directors at that time were a professor of electrical engineering, an associate professor of electrical and computer engineering and informatics, a civil engineer, an energy expert, and a couple of lawyers. What does a public utility board have to do with playing the financial markets? Why are hundreds of millions of euros locked up in mutual funds and speculative equities, rather than being reinvested directly into green energy storage or lowering the electricity bills of struggling citizens of Cyprus? The €43 million investment into the natural gas infrastructure company DEFA in 2020 has lost value, depreciating to €38 million over 5 years, while tethering Cyprus to an LNG market heavily burdened by carbon emission penalties. Then we have the joint venture with the Holy Archbishopric of Cyprus, the HAC. In 2019, AIC transferred 50.1% of its wholly owned subsidiary, AIC Ahera Ananiosimas Limited, a company designated for multi-phase utility solar parks, directly to the church. The financial terms, valuation, and transfer details of this massive deal remain completely obscured. Separate annual accounts for this joint venture are not available to the public. Why is a religious institution an active investment partner in national electricity generation? When I went down a rabbit hole in search of the AIC leases and ownership of the land that the power stations sit upon, which I could not find, I discovered in Cyprus in 1571 the conquering Ottoman Empire expelled the ruling Roman Catholic hierarchy and officially reinstated the Greek Orthodox Church. The church was to be responsible for maintaining order and collecting taxes from the Christian population on behalf of the Sultan. The church, being literate and recording births, deaths, and marriages anyway, was now also in charge of the Sultan's property portfolio. Failure to pay taxes would result in land being seized in lieu of payment. In the 300 years under Ottoman rule that followed until 1878, the church amassed a massive portfolio of land. Is this the HAC's interest in these projects? Land? Today, AIC's total lease liabilities have more than doubled, from 8 million in 2018 to over 17.1 million in 2024. We need a full public audit of these leases. Are consumers subsidizing expensive ongoing leases on church-owned land for power stations, substations, and pylons, when AHK should have utilized compulsory state land purchases instead? At the start of this presentation, I noted a critical line dropped from AHK's mission statement after 2007 to respond to its customers' needs and expectations and to safeguard satisfactory financial returns. Every major investment decision made by these rotating boards has moved in the exact opposite direction. They are yielding poor financial returns, inflating operational costs, entirely failing the public's expectation for cheap, abundant, and green energy. To secure a sustainable future, Cyprus must shift from treating electricity as a capitalistic commodity to treating it as a basic human right, a cheap, abundant model for a public utility. To fund this transformation, termination of the DEFA partnership and recovery of the €43 million, liquidate AHK's mutual funds to unlock another €226 million, and legally request that the EU redirect our multi-million euro Great Sea Interconnector grants straight into domestic infrastructure. Instead of forcing individual homeowners or private developers to bear the cost of commercial battery installations, Cyprus needs a nationalised, state-scale energy storage network. By leveraging AHK's massive engineering expertise at scale, we can lean into our grid vulnerabilities, the midday oversupply and evening shock, and transform them into an economic advantage. A primary way to absorb our massive midday solar surplus is by building an entirely electrified public transport ecosystem. Imagine a high-speed light rail or mini maglev network utilizing automated bus-sized cabins traveling up to 300 kilometers per hour. We can link this to a system of alpine cable cars traversing the Troodos range, backed by a fleet of urban electric tuk-tuks. Utilizing modular, hot-swappable batteries at automated charging stations, these transit fleets can double as a decentralized emergency power repository for the national grid, all while completely wiping out local automotive pollution. Looking further ahead, we must plan for the physical life cycle of this green transition. By 2056, Cyprus will face a massive wave of degraded photovoltaic hardware. Because standard solar panels lose efficiency over time, a localized light industry for solar recycling, battery servicing, and hardware maintenance must be established. This chart from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory tracks the world's highest confirmed conversion efficiencies for solar research cells, with industry leaders like Panasonic pushing research efficiencies towards 50%. Panels will soon generate far more power with a significantly smaller physical footprint. As these technologies accelerate, upgrading cycles will shrink, making local recycling capabilities absolutely crucial. The data suggests an expansion of the optical fiber part of AHK's operations, using the AHK infrastructure for a bigger optical fiber network for cheaper internet prices. The Cyprus Telecommunications Authority, CETA, was unbundled years ago. The result in unbundling CETA's monopoly is an oligopoly of four main service providers with similar prices. This shows that on an island with just over 1 million people, the market is restricted by the number of consumers and by geography. Unbundling is not appropriate. Finally, we must look at the profound societal impact of truly cheap electricity. Right now, consumers in Cyprus pay an astronomical 32 cents per kilowatt hour once readjustments, fees, and taxes are tacked on. By comparison, solar-rich nations like China deliver electricity at a fraction of a cent, roughly 0.07 cents per kilowatt hour. Providing stable, cheap electricity will not make our society wasteful. Rather, combined with modern, energy-efficient appliances, it will unlock unprecedented industrial innovation, eliminate domestic heating and cooling poverty, and fundamentally democratize power for every citizen in Cyprus. That's the end of my data analysis presentation. These are the questions I put to AHK or any other interested parties. I will add these questions to the section below the video. If you have any other questions to add, please let me know. I'm open to work and I'm open to donations or sponsorship for future data analytics projects. Areas of interest are the internet service provider industry in Cyprus, the various water providers in Cyprus, and the Cyprus Registrar of Companies. Thank you for watching and listening.